Three. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another weekly live stream podcast from the Arcadia High School Creative Musical Arts and Sciences program. My name is Richard Maxwell, and I am very pleased to have with me some familiar folks and some new folks. Um, you can find all kinds of things about the program and what we do at arcadiacmas.com, and you can also find us on YouTube as you are watching right now. arcadiacms.com/YouTube will take you directly to our YouTube channel. There's a lot of great stuff there. We've got tons of concerts and podcasts from just since March. We've been doing a podcast and a concert just about every single week since the start of the pandemic. But you can also find in the recording archives um, hundreds of hours, I think, at this point, of original music by the students, music videos, all kinds of really cool stuff. And it's a lot of fun to facilitate the program and to be able to be working with all these folks on a daily basis. We are mid-pandemic. No, I hope we're not mid-pandemic. I hope we're like whatever not mid-pandemic is. That's a positive thing. Hopefully, we're on the back end of this thing, but we are still in a pandemic, and therefore we stream the podcasts. A couple of us are in our main room, and I'll introduce, these are our two student teachers for the semester. We'll introduce them in a second. But students tend to do the podcasts from home because of that. For those of us that are in the space, I do want to point out that and we're lucky enough to have this big of a space, but we are way more than 6 feet apart from each other. So I don't want anybody to think that we are not somehow adhering to basic safety. We've actually been pretty vigilant, I would like to think about that. Joining me today is Mr. Richard Brennan from ASU. He is one of our two student teachers this semester. Rich, just for the sake of the podcast, you want to give us a quick intro and hello and all that fun stuff? Yeah.
Hi, everyone that hasn't met me yet. I am Richard Brennan. I'm an ASU student teacher, and this is my last semester. I am a jazz performer, composer. I play trombone, and I do sing a little bit as well. And yeah, that's the basics.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you've been awesome to be part of things so far, and it's been really cool working with you. You were actually an intern last semester, to be fair. And so it's been cool to have you back as a student teacher. And then across the room from him, we have Mr. Jalen Montgomery, who was also an intern last semester. And both of them drew clearly the short straw, or something bad happened karmically at some point in a previous life, and they're still here for a semester. Jalen, tell us a little bit about what you're up to.
Yeah, so hello everyone. My name is Jalen Montgomery. I'm also in my senior year, student teaching here at Arcadia High School. I am a bassoonist. Along with that, I am a tuba player in the Sun Double Marching Band, and I am also president of the ASU Gospel Choir.
That's right. We talked about that last semester. We haven't talked about that yet at all. Okay, we're going to have to remedy that because that's an amazing, I mean, don't get me wrong, everything that's going on there is amazing. And I say that, by the way, as a U of A grad. But in all seriousness, the gospel choir thing, that's awesome. So we need to talk about that too. That's really cool. Well, I am truly grateful to both of you. It has been awesome. We've been doing, what are we, 3 weeks in now, I think, with you two, right? Something like that. And it has been really, really cool. And it is, I think the students have definitely enjoyed working with you. Maybe we'll ask the couple of them that are here with us today if that's true or not. But it's Elias rolls his eyes. I love it. No, but it's been really cool, and I will say that I have always appreciated the partnership that we have with ASU. They send us loads of interns and student teachers and things like that, and I've almost gotten to the point where I take it for granted having so many folks here, but it's always cool the interaction and the ability to help you guys, get rolling on your own teaching practices and stuff is a huge honor for me. And uh, as a lot of my own former teachers will tell you, not a little bit ironic, but that's a separate conversation, maybe for a different podcast. Anyway, we also have Madison joining us as well. You are a first year student in the program, I believe, if I'm correct. I'm actually really bad about that. If you haven't figured it out, I don't pay attention to that. I pay attention to who's like easy to work with and who collaborates well with others. And then all of a sudden it's like, I'm a senior and I'm graduating, and then I'm sad. That's pretty much how it always works out. Did you want to say hey or introduce or anything, Madison, before I didn't want to prevent you from that.
I don't really have anything to say.
That's okay.
Just
We'll have
hi.
some. That's cool. That's totally fine. And Elias has been here for a few years, something like that.
Too long.
Too long, really? Nah. But you're a junior,
I am.
and you have been here since your freshman year,
Yep.
contributing and doing all kinds of cool stuff. And I actually have to say, it was so. This is if those of you watching this now, yesterday we had a live show, as we do just about every week, and both Madison and Elias were in it. You should go check it out. They've been involved in lots of our shows for a while in Elias's case, but even since the beginning of this year, Madison has kind of taken it on herself to become part of things pretty quickly, which is awesome. And those things are really cool that they happen and they kind of breed a synergy. So I'm glad you guys are all here. I want to talk about something with you all today that I think is kind of an interesting subject. I don't know how far we can get into it today. This might be a multi-part discussion, but I do think there is something to at least consider with all of this, and maybe it's everything going on with online learning and the nature of technology becoming so integrated into what we do, or maybe it's subconsciously something that I've thought about for a while. I don't actually know for sure. But I wanted to talk about this idea of artificial intelligence and creativity, and kind of what the distinctions might be between, say, a piece of art created by a person versus a piece of art created by an artificial means of some kind, computer driven, robotic, whatever, however you want to think of it. And I suppose what I wanted to do was start with this. If it's done artificially, is it even art at that point? And if it is, why? And if it's not, then what is it? A lightweight question to get us started on a Friday afternoon. What do you think? What do you think?
I would say it still is, because somebody had to put the time and effort into making that artificial whatever it is to make the art. So that's still someone's project, and someone created that, and that's the result of someone's creativity in
Okay,
itself.
okay, wait a minute. Now I'm just gonna see if I'm following this right. So what you're saying is that if a piece of art is created by an artificial intelligence, it's art, it's still artistic, it's still art in and of itself, because the artificial intelligence represents something artistic created by it. So you can eventually trace it back to a person.
Yeah.
If that's true, then by that logic, though, it's not really being created by the artificial intelligence, right? I think what I'm trying to say is you didn't answer my question. No, I mean, but seriously, like what's the what how does that, like what is that is there a distinction there? Does it matter?
I think it's still art either way.
Okay. But is it, I guess more to the point, in all seriousness, is that art that's being created by a person, is it really truly being created by a by an artificial entity, or is it by this, I mean, And to that end, if one of my two sons makes something, I'm just sort of thinking as we're going through this, if we follow that logic through, since technically I had a pretty significant role in creating them, if they create something, can I, by the same logic, say, well, actually, it's kind of me who created it, in the same way you credit whoever creates the artificial intelligence?
I'm sure you could try. I'm not sure how they'd take that.
Well, yeah, of course. So, so hold on. But see, that's the core of it to me. They're going to respond to that. Is that the difference? Is
I
that a
think so.
difference?
I mean,
Would
it's
the
like if you're making a robot do something, you can give a robot a certain set of commands, and so then you're making this thing. So like that's you telling it to do something. If it's just like an artificial intelligence that you give like the ability to do things randomly, then it's less under your control or the original creator's control, but it's still, I don't know, less independent than a living human being.
Okay. Madison, does this require, this is going to sound ridiculous, I realize on some level, but does this require us almost getting to the point of what we see in science fiction before this becomes actually a viable, I mean, very seriously, like, do we need to have like robots at a certain level where they are actually sentient enough to have those responses before we can say they're actually able to create art? Or is it more, I don't know, what do you think?
I don't know either. Probably not.
Okay,
I don't know.
that's all right. Gentlemen, you got any thoughts on this?
I mean, going back, because we kind of started this discussion last week. I mean,
Yes.
just going back to the idea of an AI doesn't really have emotions, and that is like one of the like basis of really just like creativity and like art in itself. So really just that is kind of difficult to say it is art in the fact that AI do not have emotion. So I'm like, I'm not really sure if it is technically art, but
Right.
I'm not sure I would call it.
But you see, okay, but you do see, and again, I mean, I'm thinking about like there's lots of science fiction forever dealing with this notion of a robot that wants to be human. And then there's this whole thing about, well, you can replace all the parts and you can, and like they get into like, I mean, some of it gets really like into like the worlds of cyborgs and who knows whatever else, and that's fine. And then it's always that's the last stumbling block. It's the emotion part, right? In some capacity. But then some, science fiction writers and in some movies they hypothesize, if you will, or they create storylines based on this idea of, okay, no, but the robot was able to do it. It was able to achieve some kind of emotional, um, like it was able to break the emotional barrier down somehow, right? So I'm just saying, hypothetically, if we get to that point, I'm not saying we're going to in our lifetimes, but if humanity does, are we then basically, is it an apples to apples thing at that point? Or is there still something else? I don't know. Rich, what do you think?
Well, I don't know about directly answering that question, but I think I can sort of navigate it with, I don't know, just I think that we are overlooking an important factor in this conversation in what determines something as being art, being that I think a lot of the times it's someone who's viewing the art is usually the one that determines something as art or not art, right? You can give someone a copy of the painting of the Mona Lisa and give them no context to it, and you could tell them it was created by a robot, and whether or not they believe it, they would still say it's art, right? You could put a painting created by a person and a painting created by an artificial intelligence, in the same room and have someone try and identify the differences between them. I think at that point, if they could, and there was some sort of significant difference where it's like, okay, this was clearly painted by a human and this wasn't, then maybe you could do that. But I don't think that that would take away from them saying that they're not both art.
That's a really interesting point. That maybe the entire distinction has nothing to do with who creates it, but rather how it's interpreted. That's a very interesting possibility. So, okay. Any thoughts on that idea at all? Anybody? Anything?
Well, I mean, yeah, like art is just like something like people, if you get something out of it and it's you feel something, and the original artist doesn't necessarily have to have been invested in it or feel anything about it. It's what it evokes in other people that necessarily makes it art.
Right, right, right. Because okay, so I have I'm sitting here and I have a granola bar wrapper on my desk. Big surprise. But like I'm sitting here wondering and I'm like, okay, on one level this is just a granola bar. But if somebody, I do not have the skills to do what I'm about to describe, so don't even suggest that I have to somehow make this happen. But like I know people who can take this granola bar wrapper and they'll like open it up more and then they'll do some folding and some magic of some kind and then it's like it's a swan or it's a frog or it's whatever. I can't do it. But at that point, I guess what I'm wondering is like I couldn't do it. I could conceive of it, but I could not do it. However, I might be able to program a machine to take used, whatever the word is, granola bar wrappers, empty granola bar wrappers, and convert them into small origami animals, right? And at that point, is it artistic? Or is this now in some, and even by me, this is going to be heavily sarcastic, maybe, but like, is this like somehow in somebody's view, this is a metaphor for the current state of the world or their personal consciousness, and the fact that the piece on the back is ripped down and hanging there represents their frustration with the I don't know what, and I'm literally just making this up as I go. But if somebody's willing to interpret it that way, I'm kind of going back to Rich's point here. Does it even matter how this came about? You know, is it like, how do you, okay, you are all creators of some kind, right? You all make stuff. So maybe this is a loaded question and maybe it's not even fully fair. But what's more important then? Is the intention more important or is the interpretation more important? So in other words, is what you intend as the artist, in whatever context you want to use the word artist, is that the more important part? Or is it how somebody interprets it is the more, like, because you do kind of have to pick one. You can't really operate creatively, even if you're only doing it subconsciously. I don't see how you could not, in some level, make that be a thing. At least in part of what you're doing. Which one do you think matters? Which one matters more to you? No right or wrong. I'm genuinely curious. Intention or interpretation?
I think it's super personal. Like it's would be different for everybody.
Sure, but I'm
Uh,
saying for you
my
personally.
personally, like interpretation is more important. Like I can write a song, for example, and I had in my head this one thing that's what the song is about, and that's what I'm singing about when I sing it. But if somebody else gets something else out of it and they interpret it in a way that helps them, great. Like it's
Okay.
if you can get something out of
So,
whatever I'm making by interpreting it the way you
okay.
need to,
Okay, so
then
wait,
great.
hold on to that a minute though. And that's admirable and awesome. Follow up then would be: are you ever, because I know you're very prolific. Generally, you're making lots of stuff, which is awesome. Do you consciously think about that ever when you're like, as you're writing something, you're emotionally or whatever going down a particular path with it, that's what's getting you to actually create the thing. But are you ever then also thinking about the possible interpretation, or are you just kind of always like, nope, I'm good and this is what's happening and I'm cool with whatever
Sometimes.
happens? Really?
Sometimes, well, because sometimes I write super specific songs that like this is what the song is about. But
Okay.
sometimes they're more like they're very, you could interpret them like a dozen different ways. So I do think about how people might like what people might think it's about. Like I do think about that.
Do you, okay, sorry, one more follow up on this because I'm really curious. Do you think about that in the context of you're aware of it, or do you think about it and it actually causes you to make different creative choices?
Sometimes it causes me to make different creative choices. I, for example, used to write all like when I've started out before I joined CMAS, I was writing music, but it was just for me. It was just for me to like, it was like a therapeutic thing.
Okay.
Um, and then when I started sharing it more, I changed lyrics so that they were less specific to a certain topic and could be interpreted differently for other people. Um, and then I went back to writing more specifically, and now I just do whatever comes to me in the moment.
Okay.
But I did change things because I didn't want them to be as specific as I was making them.
Was that because you didn't want, like, I mean, there's a vulnerability issue. The more specific you get, if you're writing them in first person or through personal circumstance, right? There is a risk, if you will, of sort of like being exposed. Like, well, I don't know if I want to share that much about myself right now. I mean, is it that kind of thing, or was it more just I'm trying to open up my creative output in a different way? Kind of, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it might have been a little bit of both. But because, beginning of my like sharing everything, but eventually was also like I worried because certain songs were so specific that like nobody would really connect to them in a way
Okay.
that I want people to be able to connect to music. I think that's important. But then I was like, okay, now that I mean I've been doing it more often, and now it's like whoever connects to it connects to it, and
Okay.
I just write my songs to be more specific.
Interesting. Interesting. Madison, so yesterday you premiered. I actually don't know if that's your first song ever, but it's the first time you've played on one of our shows. And you were fantastic. It was awesome. You made your mom cry in the best possible way. It was fantastic. She told me, she wrote me an email and was like, "This was great." She was crying and everything else. She actually literally said it was very funny. She said, "I got the link and I was watching and I was in tears. I was so happy at work." It was it was very funny. But you should be really proud of yourself because it was awesome. And we were all there. We all saw it happen. It was really great. But I do have a question about that song as it relates to this. So you write the song in whatever frame of mind you're in when you write it, whatever captured your interest and fancy at that moment that motivated you to write it. And then you get to a point where it's complete, or whatever that word means to you in your own head. And then we go back, you and I go back and forth quite a bit about, you need to do the show, you need to do the show. And then thankfully, and I would argue in my case, gratefully, you decided to, yeah, I'll play the show. And you did. Here's my question, and it's in two parts. The first part is, at some point you made a conscious decision, okay, I'm going to play. Now, maybe that was just because I want him to shut up and leave me alone already, so I'll just suffer through it. Or maybe there was something else. But what I'm wondering is, in between the time that you felt like the song was done and you decided then, okay, I'm going to play the song, or in between that and the performance, when you said, okay, yeah, I'll play the show, did you at any time either make changes to the song or at least consider any changes for the song based solely on the fact that now suddenly you knew people were going to hear it and you were going to actually perform it?
I did not.
You
It's
did
all
not.
it was all the same.
Okay.
From
Did it
when
cross your mind at all at any point? Like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that line or if I need to change this or, whatever.
no, it
Okay.
didn't.
That's okay. There's no right wrong here. After you played the song yesterday, did you or have you since then looked back on it in any capacity and felt like, you know, I'm glad I did it. I want to do more of it. We already talked about you have some others that you're working on, so hopefully we have another song for next week. But I'm wondering, did you at all did it make you think, oh, I like this song still, but now I think I want to change this part or that? Like were there things about it that the experience of performing caused you to change your view of?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I never really went back to it because I wanted to move on.
Hmm.
But yeah.
Okay. Follow-up question real quick. Just ballpark. How many songs do you feel like you have either completed or nearly completed as of 2:57 on Friday afternoon?
I have one fully completed.
In addition to the one you did yesterday?
No,
Okay, so that's the
that's
one
it.
that's fully okay, that's okay. No, there's no right or wrong here. That's okay.
But I have one that might be sort of almost completed.
Okay. What's preventing it from being finished, you think?
Um, I don't know where to go from where I am.
Okay.
I don't know how to move from one part of it to the next right now.
Okay. Is that an inspirational thing, do you think, or is that more of a I hear it in my head but can't execute it thing?
Um, Probably the like I hear it in my head.
Okay, so you know where you want it to go, you're just not feeling like you can execute it yet.
Yes.
So that's for what it's worth, that's a much different problem than not knowing where it's supposed to go. And actually, I would argue they're both equally frustrating, but in some ways, at least if you know where you want it to go, it's at least you have a roadmap. You have a destination. You just don't have the pathway to get there yet. But we can work on that. Um, and I actually, based on what I heard yesterday, certainly I'm actually pretty optimistic you'll figure it out. That's cool though. Are you going to play next week if you have another song?
I don't know if I'll have another song next week, but I
Yeah.
might play again.
Good. Are you as, let me rephrase that question. Uh, Totally honestly, and it's okay whatever the answer is. I'm genuinely curious. Did you feel like after you played yesterday, like you had at least crossed some kind of threshold, like you'd gotten over at least a little bit of a hurdle? And if the answer is no, it's okay. I'm just wondering.
Yes.
Yeah, like you're not near, like you don't feel because you were pretty freaked out leading up to this. I mean, I know you were.
Yeah,
That's
when Kennedy was starting, that's when my heart started racing. Like, oh my God, I'm up next.
but you'd done up until then. You were doing okay.
I was okay. I was kind of shaking the entire time
Yes,
on stage.
yes, yes. That's okay though. That's yeah.
For what it's worth, we all were.
Yeah. I think actually that stage moves a little bit anyway, so the shaking is kind of like inherent. I think just being on that stage literally there's a shaking element. I'm excited to see where it's going to be. I remember I was giving you a little bit of a hard time by playing it for some people in class while you were there like at lunch. So some folks were hanging back. But I think it's interesting that I had it on my phone and it was really funny. So Elias, I don't remember if you remember your response. But you were like, you did two things that I thought were so funny, and they had you like Madison. I remember this. You were stumped. It was right over by the. I know people watching this can't tell where the room is set up, but it was towards the exit, and I had my phone was sitting on a table, and you were outside the door at like 10 feet away. But Elias was close enough to my phone, and I was over here at front of house on the other side. Or no, no, no. I was inside the storage room. I remember. And Elias looks down and sees the picture And then there was this whole thing about, oh my goodness, you're on, like you had artwork.
You have album art already.
Yeah,
That's
I know. Doesn't it piss you off just a
next
tiny little
level.
bit?
Next level.
Yeah.
Did you wait,
First,
can I ask, did you do that yourself? Like, did you make it?
Yeah,
Okay.
actually, though, I got a camera for Christmas, but I didn't celebrate Christmas at my mom's until January 9th. So that's when I got it. So that picture was originally taken on just an iPad with a flashlight on.
really?
Yes.
It's really cool though. And I think the bigger issue with that is that I think we were all just kind of like that you would think about the another presentation element that wasn't necessary, but that your brain already, your creative instinct was like, you know what? If I'm gonna have this song and I'm gonna play it for somebody, I probably ought to have like, you know, the other part of it. Which I just think that's fascinating. That's really cool. I'm excited. Like if that's where you are now, where are you gonna be your junior? Like that's amazing to me. That's really setting the bar pretty high in the best possible way. Um, Richard, I got a question for you. And I'm gonna ask the same. I'm gonna ask the same thing to Jalen here in a second, just for what it's worth. But I'm wondering. So I'm like, you could take. I'm pretty sure that you could add up all of your collective ages, and I would still be older than all of you put together. But I'm wondering, you're older enough than the students. Has your sense of this creative element that we're talking about here, or this idea of intention versus interpretation, has that at all changed in at some did something, and again, if the answer is no, that's cool, but has anything changed over the last whatever in terms of your overall way of going about things? Like, do you create differently now than you did in high school, I guess is what I'm asking. And or are your priorities different now than they were in high school with regard to inspiration versus interpretation?
So, actually, in terms of creating my own stuff, aside from improvising, because I'm a jazz musician, I did not start composing music until college of any sort. I never wrote anything like on a guitar, on a piano, nothing for my trombone, anything like that. And as a part of a group called the Tucson Jazz Institute, and we would be playing big band charts. And I would say instead of creating and improvising aside, a lot of the time it was to replicate music of like renowned jazz composers and stuff like that. So yes, I think technically the answer is yes. My outlook has changed because I am creating now, and I do write my own music and that and all that good stuff. But I would say if I had to define it in terms of weighing interpretation versus intention, um, regardless of what my intention is, I would say that it's still in the hands of those who are listening to the music. Yeah, but the thing is that if I want them to interpret things or I want to sort of guide them in a direction, then I'll provide context. And that is sort of the thing that I think that matters the most when it comes to trying to determine interpretation versus intention. If you don't have any context, then of course interpretation is going to win by a lot. But with the context of intention, I think the interpretation changes.
Okay, that makes sense. Jalen, similar question, but I'm going to throw, and I've talked about this in other contexts with the students before. I'm going to throw in one other theory that's sort of been hinted at and some of you guys have talked about. And I do think it's interesting, just to be clear, Richard, I think it's interesting, this idea that you now have that perspective, like you feel Like I can tell you're confident in that perspective. Do you know what I mean? Like, and maybe that's the change, kind of like what you were saying, where, you know, the things that have evolved are not necessarily the things we would have expected to evolve, but you're like what you're articulating is clearly very much in line with your, which is good, and maybe that's the thing. I did want to, Jalen, as you answer this, and I'm not putting this in to change your answer. I'm just wondering, as sort of like a final point in this discussion. Freddie Mercury, I'm a big Queen fan, but he talked about the fact that he, you know, it was ironic. Queen was known for their music videos. A lot of reasons for it, which we can cover in another time. But they were absolutely, I mean, these music videos were iconic, right? It he used to say though that as true as that was, he really did not like always making all these videos. And he said specifically, like he liked dressing up. He liked the camp element and he liked that part, the theatrical part. But he said the problem was is that as soon as you make a video, and this gets into the interpretation part versus the intention part. He said, as soon as you make a video, the problem is that you are now robbing, I'm paraphrasing, but you are robbing the listener of the opportunity to interpret the music in their own way. Because you are prescribed, you know, as soon as you let them in on your intention, you're now pulling their focus, and now suddenly everything connects in ways that maybe they would not have otherwise perceived. And the implication being that it's not necessarily a good thing. And I'm wondering if A, you've ever thought about that, but B, just, you know, how does that relate to your own? And again, yeah, I'm a big Freddie Mercury fan. I'm a huge Queen fan. That doesn't mean that he's right. It's a good example of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I've actually absolutely thought about that, and I had some discussions with my friends about it because a lot of my friends they keep up with music videos whenever videos come out. I personally don't, and I will watch the music video like I don't know days after, or I just usually won't watch it because I just listen to Spotify most of the time. But I do think music videos do definitely have like an influence as to like how you perceive the song in itself, just because you have visual context. And with that, I think it absolutely changes your perspective on like what the actual song is saying. Like for example, like if I listen to a song and like don't have any like visual context with the song, like my interpretation of the song is drastically different than someone who just like immediately watches the video for the first time with along with seeing it.
Sure.
Because automatically your context is the music video. You're like, oh, that's what the song kind of is about. You don't really have much say into the interpretation itself. But I personally enjoy just like not watching music videos. Like I think music videos are done very well. I very much enjoy watching them when I like want to watch them. But I just enjoy like having my own interpretation for songs themselves, just because it's more. I think it's more personal that way, and like less. I don't know, less like influenced by like outside sources.
Cool. This whole topic is fascinating. I know we veered away from artificial intelligence, but I'm like, I don't know if we did actually, because I wonder if this is at the core of it. You know, um, one of the things when we were talking about this last week, I'll just say as my final thought, and then we'll go around if anybody else has one, but I'll do mine first if that's okay. Is I was thinking about this, and I suddenly had this thought about intention versus interpretation versus anything, you know, and like we were somehow getting into this idea of like the quality of what gets produced somehow being a determining factor. And then I was thinking about like a student who starts in the program and they love music maybe, but they don't have any real experience making it. So there's sort of that moment where it's like we plugged some stuff in, nobody got hurt in the process or electrocuted, and we call it a win. But when you listen back to it, it's like, you know, all garbly and it's not really like aesthetic, you know, that oral element is not exactly, uh, you know, at the highest caliber. But yet, I've always found myself rooting for that person and wanting to be very sure that, and I genuinely feel this, that they made like that thing that they made, that's cool, it's interesting, it's viable, even if on paper, like if you made a rubric of what constitutes good quality and like they would have missed the target completely, like not even shot the arrow, kind of missed the target. But that's kind of where I fall with all of this, that I personally think of it as I think intent weighs out ultimately. I think it's important to acknowledge interpretation, but I feel like if you don't have intent to start with, you can't get to interpretation. Like you can say, I wrote this piece of music and my intention was whatever, and now I am consciously going to not reveal that, so that I'm going to allow you, the listener, to have your own interpretation. I'm going to do everything I can to not influence that interpretation so that you have your own ownership of it. But I feel like if I don't start with an intention, at least for me, I don't see it, like it doesn't. I need, and again, this is just me. I need some kind of impetus to make the thing. I might guard it and hold it to myself, but I feel like it still has to be there first. And then I can decide what I want to do with it as far as how I inform or not inform the listener. I don't know. Let's go around one more time. Any last thoughts? If you've got them, Elias, you got any last anything in this area?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, intent is super important, even if like nobody could interpret anything I make if I didn't have an intention to begin with. Like, yeah, you're right. And I think that also, even if it sounds like crap, if you're trying, like obviously, like when I first, like freshman year, like the intent was there, the songs were there, they were complete, but the execution was definitely not what it is today, and it
Sure.
won't be what it is today in 2 years. Everybody's growing, and I feel like with your encouragement and all your help in this program, it's gotten a lot better, and I think it's going to continue to be. But I think it
Well,
was
I'm
the
not
intent.
taking credit for anything, but I mean, I'm,
Well,
I'm not
I
going
mean,
to. But what I
you
will say,
should.
but I do think I do think you hit something there, which is that the idea that it always improves.
Yeah.
Like I wondered, like if it stops improving, maybe that's when you stop. Like that's when you know you're done.
Yeah.
Madison, what do you think?
Um, I don't know. Um, I mean, obviously, I feel as if, like, obviously, interpretation is really important, but I almost feel as if the intent that you have is more important than anything. Kind of like what Elias said. Um, I don't know. That's just how I feel. Because, like you can't get anywhere without an intention. Um, yeah.
There is a style of music called aleatoric music, which is literally designed to be random, and it is an interesting concept. I guess I'm trying to think of a way to, but I'm not. I don't know. It's we get into a whole nother discussion about, is that even music at that point? I don't know. That's another. It's another thing. Rich, what do you think? What's your last thought on this whole conversation that we're having here?
Well, as much as I'd love to hop on the bandwagon, I think I'm going to.
No, you wouldn't.
Yeah, you're right.
No, you
I
wouldn't.
think I'll stick with my position that I think interpretation in context of, I don't know, we're trying to define art almost, and it's something that doesn't need to be debated, and I think that in itself is almost exactly why interpretation is what matters, because two people can have different interpretations of the same thing, and I think the fact that they have different interpretations is sort of what makes art what it is.
That's an interesting thought, that maybe the best art inherently allows for more interpretations. You know, that's an interesting. We've had like one podcast that has now generated in my head like 50 other podcast topics. But that's a really interesting point. Yeah, I gotta think about that. That's a very interesting point, Rich. Jalen, I'm giving you the last word, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you were talking about, like a freshman and like their creation and stuff like that. I mean, that just really like reminded me of like how I personally perceive art to be. I think art is like, in its like authentic form, is imperfect. Like, I really don't think there is.
Oh, we lost Jalen. What happened? Your laptop died. We're working on it. He's gonna come back on his. We were so close. We were doing so well. That's really funny. While Jalen rejoins us momentarily here, I do want to thank everybody for being part of the podcast. Oh wait, there he is. Hold on, let's get him back in here. What could be better than one Jalen Montgomery, but two Jalen Montgomerys?
Oh, did the other one not leave? Well,
That's okay. And the fun part, okay, we can't see you now. Okay, good. I was like, we can. Oh, there it goes. Okay, you're good.
all right. Yeah, but what I was saying, I really think like art in its authentic form is imperfect. I don't know. I mean, this like kind of ties into like a lot of other things that like I've seen just in like Texas bands and stuff like that. Like they strive for like the perfect, like perfect scores, perfect art, like stuff like that. And I've seen plenty of like band directors do it, and it like yes, it sounds very good, but I think it runs the issue of like people, not feeling like they're a part of the music if they mess up. And I think that's like kind of troubling just because I don't think there is like any form of perfect music. And that also ties back into like, if an AI were to create music, I assume it wouldn't have any imperfections just because it is an AI.
That's yeah. I mean, the idea of like it's flawed, but it's it's so perfect that that's the flaw.
Yeah.
You
Hmm.
know, interesting. Well, I think on that note, we're gonna call it a podcast. I very much want to thank Richard Brennan and Madison and Elias, and Jalen Montgomery for joining me today. This is a really fun conversation. I enjoy ending my week having these sort of geek out sessions. This is fun, and it is really cool to get to spend some time with you guys. Thank you so much for those of you that are watching, and please continue to support these wonderful students in the whole program. Again, you can find us at arcadiacmas.com and arcadiacmas.com/YouTube. Tons of stuff on those archives and recordings, videos, and all of it. So anyway, it's Friday afternoon here in Phoenix, and apparently it's about to rain. So there you go. Well, wonders never cease. Okay. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend. We got a show next Thursday, same time, same channel, 2:30 on our YouTube channel. And we'll hope to see you then. And take care. We'll see you next time. Bye.